5 years ago, I changed jobs. I had 2 months off, and I really just wanted to do two things: to catch up on sleep and to travel. Now, I love to travel, ideally to exotic places. So naturally, one of the first places on my list was Newark, New Jersey. I brought a few holiday photos. This is the Northern State Prison, as seen from my King Deluxe room at the Holiday Inn in Newark. If you look closely to the right, you can see a few inmates. Special moment. This is the rail yard next door to the prison. Now, I was staying in this lovely part of the world because the next day I had to visit a nearby warehouse to dig through a storage locker to find one piece of paper, my graduate school diploma. I didn't even know it was there, but I had to find it because the day after that, I was submitting it along with a bunch of other papers as part of a visa application to live and work in the UK for 3 years. And I needed that to actually start my new job. Now, this seems quite absurd, and for all of the annoyances in my story, and they were considerable, I was lucky. Governments are very good at putting roadblocks on the path to immigration, and for most, the process is set up for them to fail. Visa applications are very expensive. They're extremely complex. The documentation process borders on the surreal, as my digging through a storage locker 3,000 miles from London for one piece of paper might well suggest. And if you make one mistake on your very complex application, it's returned to you rejected. Your very expensive application fee is not. The difficulty seems, and as I would suggest before, a bit intentional. And I suppose that is the unfortunate reality of the climate we live in, where the dialogue on immigration is all about costs and focusing on setting limits. But watching this as an immigrant, as the son of an immigrant, but especially as someone who spends their day looking at trends in the world's economies, limits don't make any sense unless we're also willing to think about immigration in terms of a minimum level. And here's why I think that. Culturally, migrants do bring with them values and traditions that are hard to shake. But most are more than willing to embrace the values and the norms of their new home and to make it a better place. Now, I've lived here for about 6.5 years. I was born and raised in the US. I have family ties to a few European countries. I have a past I'm very proud of. But I had a day about 6 months ago that was one of the most proud of my life, the day I became a British citizen. I've lived here for about 6.5 years. I will probably die here, married to a beautiful English wife, with British mates, and a strong cultural affinity for my adopted home. I just used the word mates back there. And I'm obsessed with the weather. And there are millions of stories of people like me here in London, people proud of their past, more proud of their future. And you look at the cities around the world, places like Sydney, Vancouver, New York. These are all wildly attractive places to live and work. Not coincidentally, when you look at the top cities in the world ranked by the percent of their population that's foreign-born, they're all near the top. It's not a coincidence. London, where I live, here are the facts. Only 44% of the population of London is white British. A quarter is foreign-born, and 300 different languages are spoken. Migrants also carry with them, to a disproportionate degree, the entrepreneurial spirit that helps economies thrive in the long run. In the US, 30% of all small businesses have a key founder who's foreign-born. 30%. The foreign-born population of the US isn't even half that. It's about 13%. Now, let's take a closer look at this. Now, every year, more and more foreign students attend graduate school in America on student visas. This blue line keeps going up, and that is a very, very good thing. And yet, there's a growing gap between the number of the students coming in and the maximum number of foreign skilled workers who are allocated visas each year. This gap is illogical. Some of these students are the entrepreneurs of the future, but even for those who aren't, why encourage them to leave? There is such a shortage of skilled workers in the developed world, it only makes sense to offer them permanent residence on graduation day. I say this because simply the economies of the developed world are unlikely to match past rates of high growth unless they get some sort of a boost, the kind that immigration can provide. Now, in the long run, economies grow in one of two ways, either growth in the size of the labor force or growth in how productive that labor force is in generating output. And that's it. And yet, when you look at the economies in the developed world, their annual productivity growth has fallen from about 5% a year to 1% a year. At the same time, the demographics of these wealthy countries have plummeted. Since the peak of birth rates in the 1950s during the baby boom, they've fallen to levels well below replacement rate. And the UN estimates that at no point in the next 85 years will they reach replacement rate. Right now, there is a dialogue going on in economic circles about, in theoretical terms, are the developed economies experiencing a secular stagnation of growth? Should these trends continue, I fear that theory becomes a harsh reality. So sensible policies that encourage a minimum of immigration, targeting workers in documented fashion, perhaps from areas of the world where birth rates are higher, doesn't just seem like a good idea. It is essential. And some countries are figuring this out. In Germany, universities now waive all tuition fees for international students. German companies are actively recruiting in the emerging markets to fill the shortages of skilled workers I mentioned. Canada has a startup visa that gives full residence to those who qualify. Chile is actually subsidizing entrepreneurs to come on a startup visa to Chile to start their business within their borders. And we could do so much more than this. And I get that caps on immigration are a fact of life. I see some small value from a social perspective, much the same way I see the value of a speed limit on the motorway. But similar to the rules of the road, I think there has to be a speed minimum. And maybe we can set thresholds or targets for companies to try to meet to hire foreign-born workers onto their payroll and offer tax incentives for those companies who meet or exceed a minimum threshold. Now, if they choose not to or can't, it's no problem. It's their loss, but we can't impose a cost. But for those who do meet them or exceed them, the process, by definition, would document workers to help address the very valid legal concerns people have on immigration. It could also incentivize companies to lobby, to expand, and to simplify the visa process, and to make it more fair. Now, all ideas have costs. Unskilled workers do suffer from increased immigration through lower wages and lesser opportunities. These are short-term effects. In fact, over the long run, those effects normalize. But in the short run, supply and demand does win out. But these are costs I think we have to pay. And I firmly believe we have to start to change the dialogue on immigration, and we have to start to talk about it for what it really is. It is a catalyst for innovation and competition. It is a social good that makes our communities more interesting and vibrant places to live and work. And it is a vital force that can help sustain growth in the world's large economies for years to come. And if, in reaching for some minimum level of immigration, we can save one person from having to spend their vacation staring at a prison, it'll be worthwhile. Thank you very much.